of my favorite guests, Manoj. Uh, how have you been?
Good, good. I've been good. Thanks for inviting me. And it's always nice to have a conversation with you, a heart to heart.
Thank you. While we were talking a bit earlier, uh, before I began recording this session, uh, among the few things that we spoke, one of the things that we spoke of, oh, this is life, things keep happening to us.
Right.
So, do you ever think, why me?
Um, Not really.
Mm, was there ever a time when you thought, why me?
Probably at some point, when we are really young and but they were petty things. You would say, Why me?" for things that really didn't matter in the long run and in the larger scheme of things. But then when you look back, you say, "Oh, how petty that was! How foolish of me to have even thought like that." And often what would happen was that there would be something that, would unfold in a manner that I personally didn't like. And uh, and at that time, I would be really disappointed with whatever is happening, uh, looking for ways to explain, what happened. Not necessarily blame, but kind of like you do tend to kind of blame your own self in some manner, or maybe some individuals. And then eventually, something would happen, and then you look back and say, good, that thing happened. And at that time, I thought of it as a misfortune or something that was not, desirable. But because it happened at that way, you know, something good has come out of it now. So to be able to actually have that, it's really about reframing what's happening and how do you frame anything.
Okay.
So I guess that's how I'd look at. Uh,
It's interesting because when you were talking about this right now, one of the thoughts that came to my mind is, so reframing is a good term that you used in the end.
hmm.
I was also thinking that this me, you also used the word petty.
Yeah.
Now, petty is also is an indicator of sorts. So,
Yes.
what seems petty today might not have seemed petty when it was happening.
True.
So,
True.
suppose if somebody gets promoted over you and you thought you deserved it, so
True.
today you would think, hey, look, man, it didn't matter in the longer scheme. But does this me evolve? So why me? Does the question drop because the me has become a different persona? I called it persona because uh, we cannot be sure what we are as a person
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, of course, the me definitely evolves, I think it's in the process of evolution all the time. And we are constantly, there's some sort of feedback loop, that's constantly happening within us. And we are constantly looking at um the outside world objectively and subjectively to yourself, like how do you process something and how you used to process it and why, and is there a change? Is there a difference in the way you look at certain things? So maybe when we are younger, there is ambition and we want to look at, because that's how I think, and it's also right in some ways that we are ambitious at that time because we need to kind of, uh, as they say, stand on your own 2 feet and kind of, settle down or make some money and all of that. And then eventually you grow up a little and you realize that, okay, these things are important, but the relative importance kind of begins to reduce. And so then you start looking at certain things from a different angle, and therefore the importance starts to shrink for certain things, and certain other things they begin to become more important. So that evolution is always taking place. Now, whether that evolution takes place in the same way for everybody, I don't think that happens because everybody, has different life experiences. And for some people, maybe early on, they had some major misfortune with respect to money. And so money became a very, 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 very important for them. And now for that, huge importance to start shrinking is not going to be very easy. So something of that sort never really happened with me. It's not like I always had a lot of money, nothing like that. I mean, we've gone through very tough times and all of that, but still, I never really had to struggle that much. So
Okay.
therefore, so money has importance, but it became less and less important as I, you know, evolved, as you said. But again, let's not use evolution as a superior concept. Like I'm not saying that because I've evolved, I'm superior to another person. I can only say that I've evolved, so I have changed. So I have because that's how we grow, and let's not add any other layer of meaning to it.
So I was smiling because I had gone out of town to a wedding and I was staying with some other guests in one single room and we had these long talks. So one guy was a saintly kind of guy, does some kind of uh, Brahman duty on certain places and helps people out.
Okay.
So one of the questions I asked him, so while you appear wise, do people also think of you as foolish? So he laughed. He says, yeah, but they call me when they get stuck. So, well, that is not the perspective of my question, though, here. So, because you were saying evolution, and then you ended up saying that evolution is not some greater than somebody else, it is just your own changing phenomena, your own processes, your own thinking, your own feelings. But since we are social beings, now the question comes in tandem with what I was telling him. How do you or people around you uh, see your changes? Do you also find something? Because we were talking, why me? So now I am enlarging the question to this me is changing constantly, but the person who's coming to, so every time we have a podcast, I think you will answer in a certain manner and this and that. Suddenly you start talking what I see as nonsensical or gibberish. Then I am saying, "Arey, Manoj, what is wrong with him today? Why is he reacting like that?"
Hmm.
But a human being is so much more than certain few experiences that they have with others.
True.
So, in that sense, my question to you is when people who are around you far more uh, continuously,
Hmm.
how do they see this change and are they happy, disappointed?
I think I don't think of it that way. I first of all, I feel that most people do not necessarily uh, know how you have changed because the change is very internal to you and it's very subjective.
Okay,
So most people have some set perceptions of you, and those perceptions may, evolve slightly over time. But by and large, people hold, their perceptions are frozen in time. Like you meet somebody, after a gap, and you've changed radically in the meantime. But the person who is meeting you doesn't know that. So he has the same old vision, and that applies to all of us. I mean, if I meet somebody whom I haven't met for a long time, and if I knew him as a mean-spirited person, my first impression of that person is, I'll be a little bit on guard because I know him to be a mean-spirited person. Now, if he's undergone a change of heart, I have no idea about that. So, the same applies to others. When people meet me, I don't expect them to know what's changed in me. Now, people who are living with me, like for instance, my wife, she probably because it's gradual, so you don't really get to. It's like how your appearance changes over time, and people who meet you after a long time will see the difference, but people who are living with you don't see that. So for
true.
us, it's like, okay, she's seen me evolving and changing, but it's happened very gradually. So it's neither disappointing nor, pleasant. It's just as it is.
Okay, so let's dramatize this a bit to get the question to the essence of the question that
Right.
I had in
I was
mind.
actually going to ask you, so what is the motivation for this question? Because,
So, so for example, you said that you were ambitious as a young person, and the ambition has dwindled over a period of time, and right now it's more about getting your needs met, having some sort of reserves, and kind of motamoti. If you're okay, then you are not really uh, yearning after things, bigger cars, bigger houses, or stuff like that, which may not be the case with other people. Again, it's not a question of looking down upon others who think
absolutely,
that,
absolutely.
but more about my understanding what your journey is. And you also mentioned there are a lot of internal changes that happen.
Right.
I also have happened to understand that some of the changes surprise that happened to me have surprised me also at
Mm.
times. So if you have become more calmer, more patient, sometimes uh, it could also be negative. Sometimes you just burst out in anger and you didn't even know you were angry few minutes back.
Right.
One doesn't really know oneself as much as one thinks one does.
Mm.
Now, these small things over a period of time, and when you contemplate, then you come to a point, okay, okay, this is why the outburst happened, or this is why I was calm and cool, and oh, I didn't know that I could be patient with, say, the mean spirited person that you met. Uh, how does one understand one's journey in this subtlety of, uh, is there a process to keep looking at oneself, or is drama a compulsory uh, need for us to realize where we stand vis-a-vis anything? Go ahead. When you let go of ambition, when you let go of anger, when you, uh, in a certain time and space where you are surprised by your own actions, for example, and that's happened to me a couple of times earlier, not anything in recent time, or in studying somebody else. How do you see these subtle things? Is my question making sense?
See, um, I mean, whatever parts I kind of understood, let's first address those and see if, because then I will know whether I have understood your question.
Yeah, yeah.
First of all, if I see myself, how I have changed, and first of all, I don't think it's a, it's not happened by volition, you know. It's not happened. It's not like I decided that I want to change. It's a, because it's a process of evolution. I think there is some, I don't know to call it intelligence, that kind of takes you in some direction, and you start looking at certain things. So when you say I was ambitious, I would say that I wasn't really ambitious, because if I was, I would still be ambitious.
Okay,
So ambition was something that was impressed upon me by the society, in the sense that I'm living in a society where ambition is considered a virtue. I mean, when we're growing up, when we're children, we are always asked, what do you want to become when you grow up? And the implication, the implied, the intention there is that, you got to be successful, and you got to be successful in this way or the other. It's not necessarily money I'm saying, but whatever you do,
anything.
you need to be successful. So that implies ambition. So ambition is not just about becoming, a millionaire. Ambition is also, let's say, about becoming, a very successful, award-winning, you know, personality, performer, poet, teacher, whatever. They may not necessarily make a lot of money, but still there's ambition there, because I want to be the best in something.
Yeah.
So that thought process isn't something that is natural to us when we are children. And when we are growing up, the whole concept of competition is something that we learn. It's not very. There would be competition if there was scarce resources, like it happens in the animal kingdom. But by and large, in the animal kingdom, from what I know, by and large, animals don't kill unless they feel threatened, or they are
Yes.
hungry. So it's for survival or something like that. They don't do it because they want, there's no one-upmanship in within between them, which we have because we have learned this as humans. So for me, I looked at all of that and I thought that why am I being, what is this? Where is it coming from? And is it serving me? Me as what I recognize myself to be the core me, which feels the emotions, that the core me that experiences life. And if the core me that experiences that life, that intangible uh, feeling of I am, is that ambitious? And I realized that it's not. So there was no question of, therefore, second part, like there was no question of letting go. So there cannot be a process, therefore, because I didn't let it go,
Okay.
you know?
It is beautiful you put it this way, but I want to demystify this further because you said it in a manner which might be a little heavy-handed for some people.
Sure, sure.
So I want to jump to a question which is more deeper to us as human beings, perhaps. So when we started with why me, and my question was that pettiness was a parameter of sorts. Like perhaps magnanimity would be another parameter, or
Yes.
honesty would be a parameter, less or more of something.
Yes.
Do you think this why me actually comes from survival? Is this an instinct that we are trying to preserve that I feel threatened by? Because competition by itself has worked, even if superficially it has been put into us. Superficially, I mean artificially.
Hmm.
It has been put into us that you have to be better than others and you have to be the best there is. There is this sense of, because like you did compare it to the animal kingdom, and there is no this lion is better than others, at least not that we recognize. So while they may be uh, compared on strengths and the fastest and the other parameters which are integral to their survival,
Yeah.
uh, whether through food or through escaping being somebody else's food. Like there are times we've been, some time back we were looking at alligators and crocodiles, whatever the difference is. I'm saying they are very slow to move, it seems on the surface, but the moment when they are about to uh, devour their prey, the the speed is phenomenal. Like even
Yes.
on a video, it tends to shock you for a minute, no matter how many times you've seen it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they manage to survive, or a rhinoceros, or whosoever. Like when you look at them, you think they will take time to respond, but they don't. Somehow they
Hmm.
survive, and others
Hmm.
have survived as well. So
Hmm.
my question to you is that something which is the basis of our fear of some sort? It's a very open-ended question. I don't have a thought about it.
Hmm.
While you were talking about it, I was still thinking, why me has this so many layers that I have never thought of. Because this me keeps changing is one way, which is a very simple way. Okay, okay, earlier I was younger, I was this. Now I'm wiser about certain things. So while there are other questions that are coming up, but I'm saying as a species, when we are talking, so some youngsters that I've been interviewing on these podcasts have been telling me that they have never found a space like this and they enjoy it thoroughly. So we have conversations off the camera and they say, "Okay, that's why I like coming on to these
Hmm. Hmm.
podcasts and talking to you because it helps me think about things in a way that I did not think before." And I told him, yeah, madam, that's the most I had expected when I started. That why can't we be normal about certain difficult questions? What's the big deal?
Hmm.
So
True.
I wasn't feeling threatened, so I transfer the energy to you, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. Luckily, people like you and Rupa and Mustafa and others have joined in Hemant. They bring their own ability to accept their vulnerability and be honest about it. There are no barriers to what questions can be asked or not.
Absolutely, yeah.
So now from that space again, to put it in a context, do you think that our reactionary, let me profit from this place and let me be better than this person or let me win this race, comes from a sense of fear? I'm thinking aloud. I'm also unsure about it right now.
Sure. I mean, um, uh, we think mostly, and we look at the world uh, in terms of stories we tell, you know, to
Hmm.
ourselves. I mean, we're looking at everything, and everything is really we kind of try to figure out the world in terms of stories. So we have like small and big stories around everything that's happening, and we're trying to make sense of it. So it's like I think I've said it before. We are meaning making machines. We try to give meaning to something. And so what happens is that when something doesn't go according to what we think we have, and of course, like we have desires. So instance, we have a desire and we want let's say a promotion like you mentioned, and then somebody else gets it, and we are kind of so we feel slighted, or we feel that we were treated unjustly, and then we begin to question, and those questions are actually coming from the stories we have told ourselves, about, and either we make it into like self pity. So we say, all right, it's my bad luck, but then why me? Why God is so unfair to me? Or we try to kind of find some sort of another outside agency, to hold responsible, because it's very difficult for us to actually own up and say that maybe there is something wrong with, you know, it's a fact. It's very difficult to own up. But what happens with um let's say people who uh, the stoic way of looking at it is that it will still happen, and you will still probably go through that phase where you may be tempted to ask why me, but then you look at yourself again and say that's such a futile question, because I don't ask the same question when something good happens to me. I could very well have asked the same question when why not me instead of why me, and then the perspective changes. I wasn't in the plane that crashed. I wasn't in the stampede that happened somewhere, let's say, I wasn't in a car crash outside. I wasn't there. Why not me? I could very well reverse that. And so we could look at it that way. But that's very difficult, because we look at those as exceptional events, whereas these are the things that are, there is this whole momentum going, and we are always trying to make sure that the momentum, we're trying to kind of steer our life in some ways, and there's a massive crazy chaotic traffic everywhere, and our job is to try keep moving forward and try to find some spaces, and then there are jams and there is traffic signal. So that's how you look at life, and you keep trying to move forward. And when for some reason somebody gets a green signal and you get left behind because the signal turns red just in time, you say, oh, why me? That's such a, so you look at it this way, but you, when you step back, you realize that why not me could very well be the question too.
That's my question always.
Yeah.
Uh, so, sorry, I have a very interesting thought. So long back, I had some problem which went on for like 1 or 2, 3 years, whatever. I had a very strange way of looking at it. I kind of looked at everyone else around me and thought, what if this problem came to them?
Hmm.
And I came to a solution that there was nobody better than me to handle this problem.
Wow, that's
So,
very nice.
so this should have come to me only because I am the only one who can handle this. I seem to have the mental and the emotional bandwidth to face this for a longer period of time uh, with a better mindset than a lot of people would have. So it's not that because I mentioned it ran for a couple of years, so it wasn't like a constant thing. Obviously, on a bad day, I would cry or break down or think, how is this going to ever get solved? So why me wasn't there, but this was there. This looks like a complete no-go, and
Hmm,
how do
hmm,
you resolve it? And
hmm, hmm.
And then the next part would be, okay, this is what I can do. These are things out of my control. Let's just do what we can do because anyway, it doesn't matter. The rest of it is
If you look at what you're just saying, both aspects, whether we feel, terribly sorry for ourselves or go into the why me mindset, or we say, why not me, and say, this is something I'm equipped to. And either ways, what we're trying to actually do is create a story around it.
true.
So I think the difference there then is, can we actually take charge of the stories that we are weaving about life? And if we can, then why not make an empowering story as much as possible whenever we can? Like, let's try and look at things. Things will happen. Certain things will be always beyond your control. But when things don't go as per your, your wishes, then can we look at it in an empowering way and say, all right, this is how it is, and so now can I weave another story around it and say, all right, this could be an opportunity in disguise, which is what happens usually in hindsight. Like I said, like if you spend enough time, or look back and say, oh, something that I thought was a misfortune wasn't actually. So
True.
can we look at it from the present moment? Can we look at it in the same way instead of waiting for hindsight, to the wisdom of hindsight to come to us?
I don't have a question on that, but I have a question that could be somebody else's question on that.
Sure.
So, so I have a friend who's forever thinking things are not working well for her, or rather, she's not making enough progress in her own mindset or whatever. There is something or the other. So I will change the question. That's a dumb question. Let's just go here. This now suddenly is a better question and a much better landscape to discuss, mindscape to
Sure.
discuss. So, do you think, irrespective of the storytelling of it, this whole idea of self importance has to be a little looser, at least, if not completely gone, if possible? But I don't know if that stage is possible. At this stage where I stand, it's a it's something to look forward to that it might happen. My doctor at once asked when I was suggesting you must try a Vipassana course. He says, "Is there? Do you experience a thoughtless state there?" I was completely like flabbergasted at the question. I said, "Well, I will have to get back to you on that because it's too big a question suddenly that has come up." So he says, "Because then I am interested. Otherwise, don't come back to me saying these things or that." Then I spoke to somebody else who said, "Yes, but we haven't reached there." Yeah, okay. It's a good enough answer, but I didn't expect such a heavy question coming back in return. And after that, many times I have thought, because I am very simplistic in my understanding. I would like to believe that
Mm.
whatever I speak here or whatever wisdom seems to spout itself, it just happens. It's not my way of thinking per se. It,
Yeah, I would go on, and add to it to say that I don't even like to call it wisdom. It's just,
matlab anything. I'm saying whatever it is, it
yeah,
is.
absolutely, yeah.
So my question to you is, because you said okay, there is no letting go, it wasn't me in the first place who was doing it. But I'm saying, is there a conscious sense of saying that, okay, Ramzu has this. The only thing that you can show for working on yourself is an improved self. So he laughs at our efforts to do this. But my question actually comes from here clearly because we seem to think that if we sit to meditate or if we pray in this manner or if we just become a little more compassionate or less angrier or this, so there is an effort for a while at least. What would you want to talk about that letting go when the work is in progress itself, where you are making a conscious call? Okay, I will try and not be angry. because it seems to trouble me and it seems to trouble other people. So it's a conscious correlation that I'm making. So now this why me will not get threatened by other people putting up. I want to give a disclaimer here. I fail a lot of times whenever I do this, but still the attempt happens that okay, next time I think I should just stay quiet. Because whenever I open my mouth, I'll end up regretting that these are things I would have rather not said and hurt the other person or myself. So, do you have anything to say on the letting go process itself, or what is the role that we as human beings have in that space?
By definition, letting go will require, in my understanding, us to not be identified with the entity that is letting go, in the sense that because it's very difficult for us to. So what the if we're talking about process, so I generally don't like to talk about process, but if there's one thing that helps is that you constantly keep kind of looking at the so-called self that you are and what you're made of. Like the self is really very ephemeral, right? It's nothing more than a collection of ideas, right? And that we have about ourselves, and that others have about us, and which we have then accepted as us. So this is me. There's no real solid idea of self. It's all very, very. So if I question it continuously, and if I look at it all the time, I begin to kind of loosen the roots that have taken place. And then, the letting go happens because the roots are no longer so strong. So then when a wind, a blast of wind comes, it can be kind of, because you're not
Simple
really
answer.
doing it. It's all you're doing is constantly looking at, you can say, constantly try to focus the light of awareness. I mean, I don't like using these words because then it goes in very, but you know what I'm
Psychobabble.
saying, I mean, it's like, for lack of a better way, you use these kind of metaphors, but they have been so overused that they are losing its meaning, like these kind of metaphors.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, if the awareness is what is really important, awareness of what's happening inside you. For lack of a better word, I'm using the word awareness because how else do you use it? So you're constantly looking at um, the process that's taking place inside you, all the processes, all thought processes. And you're constantly challenging, and you know that you're going wrong and that there's a momentum, and that you know that this momentum is probably not you. So it's just momentum. It's just some, you know, neurons that are firing, which have got wired together, and therefore they are firing together because every time something happens, I react in a certain way. So they say, when the neurons that fire together, wire together. So it's like, those are triggers. And whenever a trigger happens, I react automatically. And the moment I say automatically, which means there is no volition there. How can I blame myself for something that I didn't actually do? So I lost my temper. But did I lose my temper? So when you look at it, you then kind of bring a distance and say that there is this self, there is this I that I think I am. The fact is that those are just collection of ideas that have got constructed over time. You know, there's a lot of good stuff there. There's a lot of bad stuff there. There's a lot of debris also there. What we need to do is we need to be able to see that that's there. But when we are always looking outside, we don't know what's happening inside. So we are not aware of anything that's taking place. And then we begin to kind of, I mean, we living a life mostly in an automatic mode and then trying to find solutions out there. And there are no solutions outside of you for anything. And this may be a blanket statement, but there isn't a solution outside of you. So everything is the way you process it, the stories you tell yourself, um, the questions that you can, how you question yourself, are the question that you can pose to that that self of yours, which is actually an imposter. It's imposing as you. You pose a question to that imposter. And
Hmm.
that's the process that's ongoing. So it's something that so somebody listening to this might say, oh, this guy seems to be, like all sorted and all. It's not like that. And that's what I mean. I'd like to demystify that. This is something that's accessible to everybody. And it doesn't mean that I can talk like this, so therefore I'm all sorted. No, I lose my control most of the time. But the only difference is that I can then go back and look at myself and say, this was dumb. But I wasn't dumb. I'm not dumb. This thing that I did was dumb. But this isn't me. Because I'm aware of it, how can it be me? The very fact that I'm aware of something, that can't be me, right? Because this is something I know about.
Okay. Uh, Two things. One, though, obviously, there is, I think Ramesh Balsekar had once called this conscious awareness or cosmic awareness. He had some term, the
Okay.
cosmic consciousness. One of these terms he used, okay, that is all there is nothing else.
Hmm.
Uh, but I would not want to get down that route because, well, both of us will start speaking in words that are difficult to
Yeah,
pin
I
down
deliberately
normal.
try not to bring,
Yeah. But
masters for that
but
reason.
my question is a little more uh, practical, quote unquote. So we were talking before starting the recording on this one, and some difficult times you've been having once in a while
Right.
with health and other things. In that moment, do you retain? Um, does this wisdom get retained, or does it get tested? And if it does, then like what really happens when you hit a bad spot in your life? So you need money, you don't have money, you need your kids and your wife to yourself to be healthy, and you're not. These are little gifts that we take for granted very often because we are, in spite of our awareness, we think these are to be taken for granted. इसमें क्या है? But only when we have a slight fever or a headache, then we realize, oh my God, uh, how important it is. So
Hmm.
while in the middle of something uh, really difficult, where you said the neurons get wired and fired up in a certain direction where they are pushing you, uh, and if I were to use a term where we identify with this form in a far more stronger manner because the pain is real, the emotional trauma is real, and decisions have to be made and things have
Right.
to be done.
Right.
What is the process there for you? I want to, because we've been talking, this does not necessarily happen to us all the time. So what really happens during that time? So say somebody's come to ask for his money back, you'd taken a loan from someone and you don't have the money at this point, and that person is refusing to adjust to your new timeline or something. How would you how would you go through the whole problem in your mind? What is it that you tell yourself? Or does anything happen? What happens when it hits you without any notice? A lot of things in life
Yeah.
happen to
When
us.
something, you know, untoward suddenly happens, something that you don't, I mean, something that you wouldn't like, and, an illness strikes to to a loved one or something of that sort. Um, First thing that happens is I think most most humans will go through that. Uh, our instinctual sort of fears kick in, and I think those are not to be suppressed, I feel, because those are meant to, it's like, when there is, it's I use a metaphor or sort of a very crude one, that if I'm walking on the road and I'm like, very happily moving around and suddenly there is a snake in front of me, the fear that I feel at that point in time serves the need. It heightens my awareness, my alertness. And I need to make that quick decision. And I know I'm not going to be able to think and say, and rationalize and reason at that time. That's not going to work at that time. The reasoning will come later. At this point in time, that fear actually serves a purpose. The rush of adrenaline or whatever else that happens, goes on, the chemicals that are firing in, or getting secreted in your brain. Those are, I think, necessary. So when a crisis strikes, I think that's not the time to say whether, or to step back and say, oh, whether I'm responding in an evolved manner. When crisis strikes, it strikes. And you go about the way any human will go about, And over time, if you've had several crises, then you know that certain things in the past have not really helped. And so you kind of, maybe with experience, you kind of look at certain things and say, all right, I don't need to really get that terrified of this particular thing, but yes, these are certain things that will happen. And so uh, you know we own up those instincts that we feel at that time. Those are natural instincts. And over time, then you need to kind of, later on, when the crisis are kind of past, or at least you've had like some time to mull over it, then you can look at it, and you can see what are the things that were necessary and what were not, what were the emotions that you could have done without. And most of the time, you'll realize that at that point in time, all of those things were necessary, because those were the ones that would, they were like, they compelled you to act with some amount of urgency, which was required at that time. If you were too relaxed, you would probably not respond with the urgency that is needed at that point in time. So at that time, that the need of the hour at that time is to respond instantly, quickly, when some sort of crisis strikes. And then you can think about, so I would say that if things happen, I react the way anybody would react. That is not the point in time when I question my uh, ability to stay, whether I'm able to stay calm or not. I'm not calm, and I'm not supposed to be calm at that time.
Okay. So while we spoke about why me today, I can tell you why you every time, because there is an interesting uh, uh, layer of thoughts that you add to the answers. Thank you so much for your time today, and it was an enjoyable chat as always.
It's always nice to talk, and I don't even know whether I make sense. I just talk as I talk to a friend, and I think with you, it's always like that. So we just talk, uh,
Yeah, we can
and
always
things
hope
just
that
flow
people
out.
benefit out of this.
Yeah, I sincerely hope so too.
Thank you so much. I shall see you soon.
Sure.
Yeah.